my mental health depends on me living an authentic life. And I have spent years really like getting to know who I am.
So here you are, a writer, a documentary film maker, a nonprofit arts founder, a home renovator.
Yeah. Historic
I mean,
preservationist. Yeah.
right. So where do you get the tenacity or that drive, especially as somebody who was interested in something that you said people didn't understand and there wasn't that influence around you? And what the heck are you going to do with that? What kept you going and pushing? Before we join today's episode, I'd like to introduce you to our sponsor, the Institute for Arts Impact. If you're an arts leader looking to boost relevance, resources, and revenue, the Institute's upcoming Collaborative Arts Impact Initiative is something you should know about. This pilot program equips nonprofit arts organizations with cutting-edge tools to measure and communicate their real-time public value. Just like a CRM manages customer relationships, this customer impact management software, or CIM, manages customers' impact. Want to learn more about how to measure your organization's return on art, or ROA? Email info@instituteforartsimpact.com. Now, back to Arts Redefined.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. So good to see you. How are you?
It's good to see you. I'm good. You have your hat or your hand is in a ton of different pots.
Yeah.
Let's start with Scioto Literary. And where did
Yeah.
that idea come from? And what is Scioto Literary?
Scioto Literary is a nonprofit organization based in Portsmouth, Ohio, that was founded or inspired by an experience I had as a teenager here in Sciota County. I did a residency. Well, she was doing a residency. The poet Diane Kendick had come to town through the Southern Ohio Museum of Cultural Center, and then several high school students were sent to work with her for a period of time, and we wrote poems about the art at the museum, and then that culminated in a public reading inside the gallery, and that always stayed with me because coming from a working class background, it was really interesting and important for me to like meet in person a working artist. And that was always kind of in the back of my mind. That was also the first time I really shared work. I wrote the poem that I read at the reading was about Portsmouth. And it was really the first exercise in making my hometown, my city, my muse. So, I have since gone on to write a lot about Portsmouth and make a film about Portsmouth and moved back to Portsmouth. So that was kind of the instigator. But in 2020, I met the filmmakers who made Moundsville, and that was really the impetus to incorporate a nonprofit and start writing grants and get the whole thing rolling, was to make the film Peerless City about Portsmouth with the help of the guys who made Moundsville.
So I hear working class family, Appalachia, high school writer comes. Can describe a little bit about growing up in Appalachia and the arts. And it sounds like to me you were impacted at a young age by an artist coming to town to rural Ohio.
Yeah.
Can you, if you could define what art means to you or how that changed you, how would you describe that?
It didn't all occur to me at once, right? But having that experience, and then, I graduated high school in the 1990s. I'm very Gen X. A lot of the leaders in my town, coaches, guidance counselors, they knew I was arty, but what do you do with that? What are you going to do with that? And with them asking me that question all the time, I felt a pressure to answer it. Like no one was really giving me a defined path, especially in the area I'm from. A lot of low income families, very working class. My high school didn't have college prep. We didn't have AP. We didn't even have a National Honor Society. I think there were 24 students in my graduating class, and 5 of us went to college. So the idea of like going to a liberal arts college and dedicating yourself to the study of, English or fine arts was foreign at the time. And in the bubble I lived in, that the internet was not a thing yet, and I didn't have a chance to explore a lot outside my immediate environment. So,
was your family supportive for you to go to college and study a liberal arts or get a liberal arts degree? Did they understand, or did they put those questions in your head as well?
I think there was some question about it, but it also wasn't. My mother had been to college. She was the first in her family to go to college, and then she got a master's degree. And then my father, I'm the first in my father's family to go to college, and you were supposed to go to college, but I didn't want what a lot of other people wanted, and then they didn't. So there was support in the way that they left me alone about what I majored in and what I was studying, and they knew it was going to be something bookish, but also there was this question about what on earth I was going to do, because I wasn't doing what other people's children, like there was a model, and like come back and teach, or teaching was the obvious answer a lot of times, and I was off to graduate school in Alabama, and then I was out in California doing marketing work, like just kind of following or walking a path, making the path while walking, as they say. Just not really sure what I was doing either, but I was determined to figure it out.
So here you are, a writer, a documentary film maker, a nonprofit arts founder, a home renovator.
Yeah. Historic preservationist. Yeah.
Right. So where do you get the tenacity or that drive, especially as somebody who was interested in something that you said people didn't understand, and there wasn't that influence around you, and what the heck are you going to do with that? What kept you going and pushing?
I mean, I think it was some combination of just my family and who we are. You know, I like to be solutions oriented. And then I think too, it was my hometown. There was this idea that, speaking of hometown, I hope there's not, the building's not on fire. I think that there really was this idea that, I mean, in high school, there was the idea that to make my town proud. And I don't think I could have articulated that for a lot of years either, but I think that it was, something in all that. I want to say for sure that, I would not have, my mental health depends on me living an authentic life. And I have spent years really like getting to know who I am. And there's one book that really inspires me is The Great Work of Your Life, where he talks about like, it's not right vocation, but like where it's the right work for you, and that you can't be whatever you want to be or whoever you want to be. You can only be who and what you are. So be it to the best of your ability. And I was really inspired by that.
That's interesting. So over dinner a couple nights ago, my 15-year-old daughter said to me and my husband that thinks that she's really interested in doing graphic design. So she's done some like video editing or like special effects editing. And she said, but I've done some research and I see that graphic design doesn't pay a lot. So I don't know what I should do. And I said, you're 15. Don't worry about that right now. Your job is to be curious and to explore and to ask questions. And I said, but at the end of the day, put passion before paycheck. And that's what made me think of that with what you were just saying is, I said, you'll be rich in life if you are doing something that you are passionate about and that you get up every day and you feel it's your calling and you don't know why that's your calling. And so again, you reminded me of that by saying that, but you also said something that was interesting that you quickly was something about nature of your family, that you like finding solutions, which gets to something that I always talk about. Our artists are problem solvers. Yeah. Artists are the true sense of entrepreneurs. And can talk a little bit about, does that relate with you and your work as being a problem solver?
Oh, 100%. And I think that, I mean, that goes back to when I say my family is solutions oriented. There were things like, one of the ways that my family was very supportive of my reading habit and my artistic tendencies was at one point in high school, they were paying for something like 17 magazine subscriptions. We didn't have the internet, but I had like 17 magazine subscriptions, Interview, Sassy, like, to open the world up to me. And sometimes I would see things like, I'll never forget, I found a palm tree corner shelf. And this, again, time before the internet. Where on earth in this county would we find that to buy it, or even in the state? But without even missing a beat, my dad had made one in the garage within a week. So it was like, you want it, we'll make it. If we can't find it to buy it, we don't have the money to buy it, we're making it. And that's
wow. Yeah. Talk about creative.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And he would never really call himself an artist, but he was always like that. That's another thing with my, I think, interest in houses is I grew up in constantly in a project house. Our house was always in some state of being remodeled, and there would be one or two other houses that like, oh, it's Saturday, we're going down to paint, So it also made me very unafraid of real estate in a way that I know sometimes it can be pretty intimidating, but I'm like, no, we'll just cut the floor out. Sure. I've seen it done before.
And that's one thing in my working, when I advocate for the arts and talk to lawmakers, often I would say almost every time I hear, oh, well, I'm not creative, but I'll support the arts, but I don't understand it and all of that. To which I say, you've got to be creative to write a floor speech to motivate your fellow legislators to vote for an initiative that you're passionate about. That art isn't an object, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
Right. And so for your dad to say that he doesn't view himself as creative, that's a given. That's, again, why I'm so passionate about redefining what art means.
No, I love that. Well, and I want to say, too, a couple things that come to mind when you say that is the number of people. I was just reading this book called Lost in Thought, The Hidden Pleasures of the Intellectual Life. And it's really about learning for learning's sake and like staying curious, like you said. And one of the things that Zena Hitz is talking about in that is the number of people who experience creativity killers at some point in their public schooling or even in their private school, but in the course of their K-12 education, like, suddenly they're told, well, you can't write or you can't do art well, and a lot of times it shows up in a grade. You get a C on something, you're like, oh, I wasn't good at this, you fail it and you're like, I'm never doing this again. But I also think, too, one thing I want to say about artists is, and as you just stated a little bit ago about being real entrepreneurs, is that's it. Like we are that same well of creativity you have to use to create a business, to create, your life's work. And for instance, a lot of times when I hear now, like, what are you going to do with that humanities degree? I tell people, tell them you're going to build an empire. Ignite Portsmouth, which is a program through the Shawnee State Cricker Innovation Hub down here in Portsmouth. They just did their latest cohort, and they had something like 7 artists in there, and it's a 8-week entrepreneur course, and they had 7 artists going through to test out their business plans. I think that's incredible and says so much about the world catching up in some ways. Like if you're gonna do this, it's not the same as just going and getting a job for 30 years. Those days are gone. But yeah.
And if we're just teaching STEM, it's one dimensional. We've got to teach people how to think and ask questions and wonder and fail and try again how to remedy that.
I'm a big believer too in not just like teaching people to think, but giving people space to process. Like a lot of times our schedules are so jam-packed, and then we shove in television and social media and our minds are just hijacked, right? Like sometimes you need that space, like just drive without the radio on or talking on the phone and, let your mind wander. We need that, and we don't have that time anymore. But the other thing with creativity killers, I want to say is, I think, in that context, in that book, it's really about like moments of discouragement, like early on, that people feel, compelled to quit or like avoid because they're not naturally talented or something. And that's just one narrative from one discouraging person. But other creativity killers, and especially in a community, in Central Appalachia, coal impacted, distressed community, other creativity killers can be poverty, hunger, addiction, like these social issues that we're not addressing. I just sometimes I really think about like the number of kids who won't have a chance to self-actualize. They're just in survival mode their whole lives. And I think too, like providing models for them to be in the arts or to be creative is really crucial.
That's a great point. And I need to remind myself of that more, that all of those social issues are creativity killers for sure, So that's a great segue into your humanities work.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about that project that you're working on and what that entails?
Yeah. And I moved back down here in 2023 and really kind of just paused everything and did a listening tour, and have kind of just gotten to know the community again. And in doing so, have kind of reinvented the model of what I want to do. And really what we're doing now is, I call them humanities interventions, but intervention sounds so like recovery focused. And I'm sure, in Portsmouth, Ohio, using that terminology is, second nature. But we bring the humanities to you. That's really what we're focused on right now. Programming includes, poetry workshops and documentary screenings at organizations across town that include like local high schools, local junior highs. There is an apartment complex for young people aging out of foster care. There are counseling centers and recovery centers, and we can take humanities programming to those places. And I think that that's really the model that we're working on, these kind of like humanities interventions. And then one of the programs that I'm really excited about that we're doing is called Appalachia, and it was invented by Ned Doherty, who is a playwright and poet in Green Bank, West Virginia. He came to town a few months ago, and we did some of the workshops around town, and they were really well received. But what he does is he gets people together to collectively write an ode to their town. And, sometimes it starts out, he's like, tell me about this place. And there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of, social issues across Central Appalachia. And then by the end of it, people were just so excited. Like, I've never thought of my town this way. And it really, we're using that as a tool to cultivate civic pride, because pride is important in revitalizing places.
Yeah, absolutely. That sense of place, right? Yeah. And just feeling. And that's one of the reasons why you did Peerless City as well, correct?
So Peerless City is the documentary that we made about Portsmouth, and it looks at the history of the city. And I say the economic and civic rise, decline, and rise of the city through the lens of two nicknames and one city slogan that we've adopted over the last 100 years. And right now, the city slogan, officially, it's on the letterhead, on city letterhead, it's painted on the flood wall, is "Where Southern Hospitality Begins." And I was always fascinated with that, like so much so that I went to grad school in Alabama to be like, what's this Southern thing? I mean, we're in Ohio, right? Like, I did not understand regional culture at the time. And then my brother told me that in the early 20th century that a lot of people in Portsmouth were calling it Peerless City, and they did. And we found all these businesses that were taking on the Peerless City name. We had a skating rink, Peerless City Skating Rink, Peerless City Motor Company. I mean, baking powder, right? Like, we just had all these businesses that were Peerless City. And then now the current iteration, or the one that's catching on, you can hear it on the radio. You see it on T-shirts. There's a small group of guys in town who are calling it the Comeback City, because everyone loves a comeback. Created by boosters, not necessarily by place branding, but we do talk to a couple place branders, and about what the purpose of a slogan is.
Yeah, talk to me about the arts in rural America today. What do you see? Any surprises, frustrations as it pertains to arts in rural America? How are lawmakers or local officials responding? You've got a university in your area. What's happening there as far as creatives or the arts?
The university is a really interesting entity in town. They have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. We have this really beautiful arts facility, and we have one of the top gaming programs in the nation. And as such, someone has just recently opened a business called The Vault, which is a game room. And you can go there and play a number of different video games. I don't know a lot about that world, but I do know that it does engage the English department, because they have to learn about narrative, and it engages the art department. So there's a lot of like interdisciplinary work there. And then in rural America, arts in rural America, I think it's the algorithm working for me, but especially on my LinkedIn page, I keep seeing like great things coming out of rural America, and there are a lot of programs. There's the Center for Rural Design, Rural Assembly. Like I have my eye on that, and solutions are coming from there. My concern is it's like anywhere, things are happening here. We have this really incredible nonprofit called Trillium Project, and they just got a National Endowment for the Arts, Our Town grant to do public art across the city. And it's the story of art as a revitalization tool. All of the artists that were in the Ignite Portsmouth are also Trillium artists, like art as a revitalization tool. But my fear is I don't want things in rural America to follow the old gentrification story. Once the artists move in or the artists make it cool, and then people with more money move in to develop it, and it becomes unlivable for the people here. Like it's the art that's happening now is art for the people who live here now. And although talent attraction is important to develop your tax base or whatever, I really think that we have to keep that in mind. Because Appalachia right now is identified as like a climate haven, and I think that's a way, like, come live here cheaply, or come buy something cheap now so you can avoid forest fires later. And it just stings a little, just enough to be like, pay attention to this, because we've seen it in Franklinton, in the short north, in Columbus. Like, we've seen it in places where it just becomes it loses its artistic grit.
I've been saying for years now that if the story we keep telling isn't getting us results, we need to tell a new story. And what I mean by that is, when we've advocated for the arts for 30, 40 years, well, especially since the 1990s culture wars, we've turned arts impact to an economic development story.
Mm-hmm.
And so we often talk about the economic impact and the jobs and all of these things, right? Revitalization, et cetera. And that's important, but it's not the full story. And quite honestly, if that story resonated, we wouldn't be fighting for funding every year, or the fear that funding is shrinking. And we see more of corporate America giving to social service more and not the arts. We know intrinsically the impact of the arts. Can we measure that? So we're talking about things like empathy and kindness and creativity and entrepreneurship. And we're going to show that, you can measure empathy, and it does have a significant public value. And so it even strengthens, again, going back to the arts isn't an object, it's an outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a way of life. I mean, I just said to my mom this morning, what people don't understand about this current house renovation I'm doing is this house is a piece of art in my body of work. Like it is something I live in. It is something I look at. It is something that I have the story of, I will write about it, and it feels purposeful, and it feeds me. there is a hunger there too that I think that we can measure. Another thing I'd love to measure, and I have this in a narrative medicine pilot project that we're going to do, is emotional maturity and social emotional learning. Like those need measured, and the impact that the arts can play in that, and in developing your emotional maturity. Because I mean that's vital for leaders, and I mean, think we're in a leadership vacuum anyway, and I would like to see I'd like to see people like prioritize emotional maturity. Um,
So
yeah.
how do you talk about that in your local community? What are some tips or tactics that others that live in rural America and are struggling with the same issues as you are, that they don't want revitalization to come just at the benefit of the developer, but it can truly be something that is purposefully for the region and for the people of that area? How do you talk about why arts culture is an important thing that we make sure that is infused in your community?
I mean, I think it's hard to pinpoint when you say how do you talk about it. It's all I talk about. Like people know if they're going to get in a conversation with me, some of this is coming up somewhere along the line.
Here comes Amanda.
Yeah, she's going to talk about let's stop tearing down these buildings. Like, but I think I think that.
And you don't tire from it either, right?
Oh,
Like
no.
that's what I get from you. Like you
Yeah,
just
it's too much about who I am. Like it's just too much about who I am. and
right. And it
and
sounds like you're
that's
finding like-minded people in your
yeah.
there as well, right? And I constantly look at how do we reframe to resonate? And if what we're saying isn't resonating now, we got to continue to just chip away and
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like it's been really interesting. Like, how do I find those people, right? And I mean, and a lot of my people are even like it's very across the political divide. Everyone talks about the polarizing times we're in. I'm like, if we get people past sound bites, we
Right.
get to the good stuff. And I think that especially in these conversations, as I've just kind of inserted myself in a lot of places and keep showing up. I am a big believer that if you want, like, you have to show up for people. You just have to show up. And I know that the Cricker Center, again, I mentioned it a lot because it has really been. They have a 8 a.m. Monday morning coffee that I started going to months ago, and it has been a really important part of the way I've created community for myself. I've spoke at it. I listen to the speakers. I've had coffee with some of the speakers. Like, it's really just an important thing to continue to go to. And the same Cricker Innovation Hub, they're doing a book study right now on Brene Brown's Dare to Lead that I joined, and that's a fantastic place. You're talking about vulnerability the whole time. That's a fantastic place to talk about arts, emotional maturity, social emotional learning. I learned about a very large book club that meets once a month recently, and I'm like, I'll be at that next time. Just inserting myself in, especially since my nonprofit is primarily literary. I know the names of the librarians. I know the names.
Yeah.
I'll show up to all the bookish stuff. So
It's a great story. Amanda, I love what you're doing. Thank you for your time in joining me. We'll leave all this information in the show notes, and I look forward to keeping tabs on what you're working on next.
yes, thanks.